Welcome to the show, SEC Football Live here on the 440 Sports Network. I am Braden Gall. We are brought to you by ML Rose, 6 great locations all over the mid-state area. Number 7 coming soon. Great burgers, great beer, all kinds of great stuff. Joined today by Josh Ward, WNML in Knoxville. Josh, we were going to do a Tennessee State of the Union, our second in a series here as we look around the conference in the spring and sort of get a sense of where everybody's at before we get into the off time in the summer. And so I guess I'll do that with you a little bit later on today, but I suppose we have to talk about other things. Josh, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Yeah, the state has changed and what's going on with Tennessee football right now.
And if you need a beer and you're in town, ML Rose is your spot. All kinds of good local craft beers from Middle Tennessee and a couple of that have been sourced specifically for ML Rose from places like Asheville and outside of the area, but committed to the Nashville market and committed to Middle Tennessee. Fantastic burgers, as my wife says, the best ranch dipping sauce in the city. So they've got that going for them. All right, we're going to talk Nico here. And I've got a lot of things that I think. I've got a lot of things that I know, and I want to hear what you think and what you know. And I want to go back to, because I don't think everybody is innocent, but I don't think everybody's guilty and everybody's innocent all at the same time. The NCAA, Tennessee, Nico, the parents, the coaching staff, kind of everybody. But I want you to take me through the timeline here. I have been told and I'm under the impression that all 12 teams in the playoff had folks asking for raises going into those games, basically. I think that's the gist of what fans need to understand about the playoff. How long has this been going on, and how much is the Friday no-show at practice, like how much is that is just the tip of the iceberg versus how much of that was sort of how we ended up where we did in Knoxville?
Yeah, the part about what you mentioned, players asking for money at the playoff and all 12 teams, I don't find that to be anything at all. Players are asking for money 12 months out of the year. Players are asking for money during the season, right before the season starts, right after the season ends, during the offseason, nonstop. If anything changes with a player leaving and money is then all of a sudden on the table, you have players go to whomever and say, hey, can I get some of his money? It's nonstop with athletes asking for money. So yeah, I'm sure players did ask for money in December, just like they did in November, October, and September. That's just the way that it works.
So real quickly, just so people know, like I have heard a story about a high-profile SEC player 2 years ago asking for money in the game, in the middle of the game.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying anybody should like that, but at this point, nobody should be surprised by it.
Yeah,
would be my point. You asked about how long it's been going on. So middle of last week, before the Thursday afternoon report comes out, there was no talk of Nico possibly leaving Tennessee. Now we find out that there was some back channel conversations, which, by the way, go on all over the place. Schools with players, players with schools, or the third party representatives is how it's done. So there's that part of it. But the beginning of the final week of spring, Tennessee was going through spring practice, believing Nico was going to be the starting quarterback in 2025. I know there has been talk of, well, actually Nico's father or family members not being at practice. That was different. And maybe that should have been a red flag to everybody covering Tennessee football, but it wasn't brought up during the spring. So this happened so quickly from Thursday, even Thursday night after the On3 report, there was still communication from Tennessee believing everything's going to work itself out. Everything's going to be fine. The photo of Nico at Joey Halsley's house. He's the OC and quarterbacks coach. And then a few hours later, he's no longer a part of Tennessee football. It happened as quickly as it possibly could have.
Is there not? So I guess then, so one of my questions that I really would love to know, may never know, and that is how much evaluation the coaching staff is doing of this player sort of at all times. Because I imagine, my assumption, Josh, is that was not the first time that they had heard that Nico wanted a raise. It seems ignorant or naive. Maybe I'm being naive. Mm-hmm. That there had to be the coaching staff had to know. In which case they have to do calculus at that point. They've got to do math on what they think Nico will become in their system, how much they can win, how successful he will be for them, versus how much that is worth in collective dollars or whatever it might be. And it doesn't strike me. Josh Heupel doesn't strike me as a guy who would emotionally react to what took place on Friday and just decide out of the blue that this is what he needs to do. It feels like something he should have been prepared for. And it feels like that's, again, maybe I'm making assumptions, maybe I'm being naive here. But is that not what they had? Like, this isn't an emotional decision. This is a calculus, right? Like, hey, he's not worth this extra money because we think we can do better with so-and-so. Or is it purely emotional and trying to make a statement here?
Well, I think it's both. I think there's absolutely emotion on both sides that had probably built up. There is the calculation of what is he worth. There's Chris Lowe's report of the asking price of $4 million. Is there not some in between? Is it a hard line at $4 million? You can't find an in between of where he was and that massive number to where it is closer to what would be considered market value? Because I'm of the opinion that to this point, Nico has not earned all the money that he's been paid. Part of that's because he was in high school and he was a backup quarterback while he was earning part of it. So he didn't really have much of a chance to earn all the money because he was paid so much of it while he wasn't even a player for Tennessee, at least as a starter. So anyway, that's why I think there was some emotion to it. The job of Josh Heupel is to put together the best team possible to win. And as of a week ago, it appeared their opinion that the best team possible would include Nico starting at quarterback. In December, if there was talk of, okay, you got to get him more players, he might look at the transfer portal. Hey, actually, he does want more money. Well, then that should have been a red flag to Tennessee staff. If there might be something going on here, we need to come up with a potential plan. So up until the end of last week, Tennessee's investment was still in Nico with him as the starting quarterback. The evaluation a few years ago was he is the guy. He's the top quarterback we want in this class. He is going to take us to the highest level we believe we can get to, and that's competing for a national championship. And that was the wrong evaluation. And we talk a lot about Nico, and Nico has to take responsibility here. His father is obviously such a huge part of this and why things went the wrong way. But Nico's father's demands, requests, however you would describe them, of get more talent around my son. That's been going on for a long time. That predates December. And the request for more money, they've at least known about that for a few months now. So the planning for something else had to have started before last week.
Well, it should have.
Yeah, I say it had to have if your goal is to go compete at the highest level, because now you don't have Nico, and the goal is still go compete at the top of the SEC, get to the playoff, and right now that's obviously harder to do.
Look, ain't nobody innocent in this. Okay, the family, the father, the handlers, the player. I don't like it that the players now have to carry this much responsibility as someone who is not a fully formed adult, but also not a kid. They're sort of in the middle on this, but this is part of this age in life. You have to learn consequences to your actions. It's sort of like the thing we all have to learn at that age. Unfortunately, this is a tougher situation. Here's the bottom line: who's better because of this? No, nobody is better. Tennessee's not
That's
better.
That's my takeaway.
Nico's not better.
Nobody won short term in this battle.
Yeah, and so this is I find myself struggling with the value here because what I want to know from the coaching staff, which we'll never know, and I'll just ask you straight up, which is if the amount of development took place for the quarterback in this situation into his second season as a starting quarterback, the normal regular amount of progression for a player who's very talented, what is he worth to this offense and to this team? And in a world where it's not your money necessarily, and I know administrations are tired of asking boosters for money, but like, what is $3 million versus 2.2 if he's the best option? I'm not blaming the coaching staff for this. I understand why they took a stand, and I understand how it's going to end up being the story of leverage in the schools and the coaches fighting back, and I get all that, and I'm not even necessarily opposed to it in principle. But if he takes the regular step of progression in this case, isn't he worth it at some point? I know he was not worth it last year with his play, the overthrows. You know, I get it. He wasn't worth it last year. He wasn't worth it, to your point, the 2 years before that. But how, this is the guy that was the savior. How is it that this guy is the savior for 3 years and now, well, but $3 million is too much. 3.5 is too much. And,
right. That's what I would like to. I would like to know what number could they have gotten to where none of this happens. And if the answer is 4, then I would not do that. If the answer is 3.2, then I'm probably doing that because it is closer to market value. If he's worth $2 million as a backup quarterback, then what's 3.2, 3.3 as a starting quarterback where you expect him to be a lot better? I do think there's some points about the talent around him. Part of the concern now is they have to find another quarterback, and we have the unknown aspect there. Who is his replacement? Because I don't think it's on the roster right now. Maybe by midseason, George McIntyre, they believe he is ready to go. Is he ready at the start of the season? Is Jake Merklinger, which we can get to, but that's part of the unknown. But they have a really young wide receiver group. They have an offensive line that is a complete unknown going into the start of the season. They have talent behind him at running back, but they do have to replace Dylan Sampson. You want a returning quarterback here. You want a guy that's been in the offense, in the system, entering his third season, and that guy is gone now. So that's why it's a shame that all this happened, because Tennessee doesn't win in this. They may win the PR battle, but now they have to find a new starting quarterback and get that person ready in a few months, and they just wasted the spring with Nico as the starter. And I can't come up with a way that Nico wins short term in this case either. That's why it's a big shame to me, because I think both sides end up losing something in this split.
Yeah, nobody wins. Nobody's better. Like, I don't think Nico's going to go do a better job. I mean, unless it's USC that's going to pay $3.5 million because that's the one school that has the money and the expectations. Other than that, like, you're not going to go win at UCLA. I don't know what his relationship is like with his former coach, and because his brother, sort of stiffed them a little bit to go to Arkansas, shockingly, without ever visiting Fayetteville, which I think, of course, is totally on brand for this entire saga. You can't go to the SEC, so Big Ten schools might have that kind of money, but you're not going to get more money and go win more games than you would at Tennessee, and Tennessee is not.
Even
Tennessee
the timing's
is not
bad.
Better.
Yeah, if this happens in December, it's no good, but that gives Tennessee the time, much more time to figure out what it's doing at quarterback, and it gives Nico more options to find the right school for him, more time to get ready, because I'm not saying this is going to happen, but his goal has been to spend 3 years in college and then go to the NFL. This does not help him in his goal of being as high of a draft pick as he can be next spring. So that's another aspect to everybody missing out on something with this happening at the very end of spring.
Describe his sort of location in the community, in the locker room. Like he's always been sort of a very chill is the way I would describe his personality, and sometimes that hurts him in key moments of games, like where it just looks like he's sort of unengaged. I know that's not how some people are wired. That's not how they look when they're competing. I've heard lots of stories about just very respectful, very kind, very nice guy in the community to people. I've heard other stories just that the sort of lackadaisical approach has affected him in other ways. Where is his place in the locker room? How is he viewed? He's not a vocal leader, but like, is he? I've never heard any bad things about how he was in the locker room or around the community.
Yeah, I've not heard anything bad about Nico. He is very chill. He does have a laid back personality when he's in front of microphones and cameras. Doesn't say a whole lot. I never thought anything negative of that. That's just his personality. A lot of coaches probably prefer that out of their quarterback. So I've never heard anything negative about Nico from a locker room standpoint with his work ethic. Don't confuse chill attitude with lack of motivation. I think he was highly motivated to be a really good player and try to be a really good teammate. Last year during the season, sometime, Cooper Mays heaped praise on Nico and the way he handles himself, especially considering all the attention, the talk of how much money he was making before he ever took a snap. And Cooper and other players too, but Cooper stood out to me because he was a senior leader and representative of Tennessee football. Remember last summer, Josh Heupel was talking about how well Nico had handled everything and was, I'd have to paraphrase some of the comments that he made, but was ahead of where Josh Heupel was at the same age when Josh Heupel was a college quarterback. So did he do everything right? I don't know about NIL responsibilities. The truth of the matter is everybody recognizes Nico was paid money to play football at Tennessee. So some of the responsibilities he had from autographs and stuff like that, I don't know anything there, but I've never heard anything negative about Nico from anybody at Tennessee.
Could you make the case that he's more valuable to the team, aka dollars, in this negotiation because of the situation of the roster, because of what the father was asking, and because they need more talent, and because they're losing a lot of really old veteran players off both lines of scrimmage, for example? Like, could you make the case that that's part of why he deserved more money, was that he is one of the lone returning pieces of stability?
If you're negotiating on the other side on behalf of Nico, you would make that case of, hey, look, it's a new group at wide receiver, completely unknown. It is a new offensive line that has a big question mark going in. And then I mentioned the running backs, and they have Miles Kitselman back. That's it. Miles Kitselman, Lance Hurd, and Nico were the returning starters for Tennessee. And that's a big task in trying to rebuild an offense that, by the way, was disappointing last season. And some people have pointed to, well, the offense was disappointing with Nico at quarterback, so that hurts his value. Okay, the goal is that he's better this year, and I think he would have been a better quarterback for Tennessee. How good? That comes back to the talent around him. Now, others have said, yeah, but they need to be using money to go get more talent, which I do believe his dad had asked. Mike Matthews almost left in December. He almost left partly because he was afraid that Nico was going to enter the transfer portal. And Nico staying was an influence in Mike Matthews wanting to stay. Mike Matthews went out to California earlier in the offseason to work with Nico. So
what are we
the communication here was poor. And Nico's father, to me, is the biggest reason for that. If Nico's father is hands off and is not doing everything that he has been, then we don't get to this situation. So that's where it began. But that also should have been a red flag in the recruiting process and during the last 2 years. So that it's not news. It is not new information to Tennessee staff, to everybody around Tennessee, that Nico's father is the way that he is.
Well, regardless of how this plays out, Nico finding success, Tennessee finding a quarterback or not for either of them, he is the story and the face of this era of college football, which is he's the first one to sign the big 4-year deal and get all the coverage for being the first one to do that. He is one of the driving forces, at least Tennessee is, at least, as Jonathan Skrmetti, our attorney general, wins an injunction against the NCAA so that we can all pay recruits now. And some of that is because of Nico. And now Nico is the first. And here's the other thing. This is going on all over the place. This is just the one that happened in real time and sort of in public. And at the high, because of his name and because Tennessee and because it's a high-profile position and a high-profile school, it's getting all the coverage. Nico is the face of this story, the NIL era. This chunk of time, whether it's 3 to 5 years, whatever it might be, Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava are the face of this story now.
Yes, I think for most people who follow or keep up with college football, if you think about, hey, big-time salary for a player, who got the big deal, who was the first to kind of break through and make millions of dollars, a lot of people will point to Nico. He has been passed since the deal that he got in terms of annual salary, but I don't hear as much talk of what Bryce Underwood's going to get at Michigan or what Mintz is getting to go to Duke or Carson Beck. That's been brought up, but the face of it, as you're describing, that was Nico. That was the name, that was the player that changed a lot of this conversation. Part of it was, hey, wait a minute, he's getting this before he's ever stepped foot on campus. And but that's a part of it. That changed laws. And Tennessee fought the NCAA on his behalf. Part of that comes back to entitlement, I think, that was allowed of more Nico's family than Nico himself. Again, he's part of it. But every step along the way, where we've seen major change and we've seen fighting and we've seen the first this or that, a lot of it has been connected to Nico and Tennessee. It was all good for Tennessee up until this most recent update of the new player. To, if you want to call it a holdout, I don't really describe it as that. Just infighting of a new contract and trying to leverage power one way or the other. Nico becomes the face of that as well.
I realize this is a very dangerous question, but do Tennessee fans realize the irony of all of this, that they were fighting tooth and nail to pay an individual against the law, against the rules, whatever you want to call it, to win those changes? We want to pay him as much as we want to. We want to waste the money as much as we want to on this guy. We have the right to do that. Oh, that's too much. We're not going to pay him anymore. Right. And I'm not saying that Josh Heupel is wrong on this. I'm not saying Tennessee's wrong. I'm not saying Nico's wrong. Again, I think everybody's wrong. I think everybody loses in this. But do the Tennessee, I know it's a dangerous question. Do Tennessee fans realize the irony of now cheering for Heupel in the school to not pay him a couple of extra bucks after fighting against the rules to make sure they could pay him as much as they want?
Some do. Few have expressed that irony to me to this point. And I don't think that would be unique to Tennessee. It's just that Tennessee is in this position because it comes back to they feel like he was a disappointment. But you know what the funny thing there is, up until the story on Thursday, even after the Thursday story, because of the father's tweet and fans are acting the way they are, not all, but many were online and posting some stuff they shouldn't have. But there'd be the top 10 list. We talked to you about quarterback rankings. We talked to you about it on our show when a list came out. And if Nico was outside of top 10 or he was ranked too low in fans' opinions, they were still defending him, saying he should be higher. But now he's leaving, and he was overrated. But that's the passion of fans, and Tennessee is going to be at the extreme levels of that. If you're defending your guy, you're going to go overboard in defending him. If you are then going against someone, one of your former players or coaches, you'll go overboard you'll go overboard the other way. And this is the perfect example of that.
Well, and again, this is not all Tennessee's fault. This is not the coaching staff's fault. This is the NCAA's fault as much as anybody else. Carson Beck is a longtime starter at the best program in America, and he decided not for me. Mm-hmm. And they lose a starting quarterback and run with a guy who's a backup. So this is not, to your point, it's not unique to Tennessee. It's just that this particular player has been so high profile that it seems odd. And again, you didn't really answer, but it's not, I'm just, what would have been a reasonable expectation with this roster and this quarterback? I think it's, if he's as good as everyone believes him to be for this many years, he was going to take a major step forward in his development this year. This is the year that a quarterback generally explodes when they're talented like this, is their second year as a starter. Look at Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. Backup, learned how to do it. First year starter, had some growing pains, but showed flashes. A lot of people expect him to be a very good player this year in his second season as a starter. I think
I think the reasonable expectation, if none of this happens and Nico is still the quarterback, and that's our discussion to close out spring, I think a reasonable expectation was to at least get back to the playoff. That would have been an internal expectation that everybody would have nodded along with. If you looked at the win totals for SEC teams, Tennessee was there, at least in terms of the number, at 9.5, with Texas, with Georgia, and Alabama. And I think a lot of people said that's fair. It's kind of juiced to the under, but the odds makers have come back and said, they're not there anymore, and dropped them already. So the expectation was to go try to get to 10-2 at least, and try to get back into the college football playoff and see if this young group of wide receivers and the offensive line could come together as the season went along, with Nico leading the way. And by November, maybe you're a better team. You have an offense that is closer to what the expectation was a year ago when they fell short, and can give them a better chance to compete. But now we're rewriting what the expectations are as Tennessee looks for Nico's replacement.
I want to know where this roster is relative to all of Josh Heupel's other rosters, total talent-wise. But I am curious, if you're spinning this internally, and I don't necessarily think this is just spin. I think there's some truth to this, which is if you're going to lose a ton of senior leadership and you're going to rebuild things like the receiving core and the offensive line, you could make the case that if you're going to restarting all together at one time, while it might lead to fewer wins this year, isn't necessarily a terrible strategy. That if you get a young quarterback with a bunch of other young players around him, they can all grow kind of like an old school college football team, Josh, grow together into a 2 or 3 year window. Yeah, again, roster management issues aside. Is that a way to spin this and say, look, we know now that we're going to have to replace this particular position in this player, but we've got a lot of young pieces, and now they can we're going to hit restart a little bit harder this time. Does that make sense?
Sure, maybe. But who's to say one of the key pieces, either in the next few days or at the end of the season, doesn't say, you know what, I'm going to hit the portal. So I don't know. It's difficult to predict that, hey, they're going to build together, because anybody can up and leave, as we just saw with Tennessee's quarterback, because that wasn't the expectation. Then all of a sudden, snap your fingers and he's gone, and you're resetting the talk of what Tennessee can be. So Tennessee's highest profile player in this freshman class is David Sanders Jr. Maybe he's the guy for 3 years and he goes to the NFL and he's a top 10 pick. Maybe at the end of the season or after 2 years, he decides I can get a better deal, better spot somewhere else, and he's gone. You can say that about anybody. Ricky Gibson, before the start of spring, out of nowhere, there's a conversation of, he got a new deal in December, but he might want that deal reworked again. And it's worked itself out. And he's still at Tennessee, just like Boo Carter and Mike Matthews are still at Tennessee. But I hope part of the lesson is that until the structure changes, anything can change with your roster, with your player personnel at any moment.
So where's this team, right? Assuming this is the roster they have, basically, where's this group rank as we look forward from this particular saga? Where's this group rank relative to Heupel's seasons at Knoxville? Is this one of his more talented rosters, top to bottom, in your opinion?
Well, I think the overall athleticism probably ranks higher. But when we talk about talent versus developed talent, that might be the gap that Tennessee has to make up quickly. Wide receiver would be one of those. There's a lot of talent in that group. Mike Matthews, Amari Jefferson, a transfer from Alabama, was highly touted. Tennessee really wanted him a year ago. A year later, they get him. Braylon Staley has plenty of talent. The freshman, Travis Smith, has plenty of talent. How ready are they, though, to go make plays with the unknown at quarterback, by the way? That's a big question. I think at running back, Peyton Lewis is a really nice talent. I mentioned David Sanders Jr., probably the most talented tackle they've had, either him or Darnell Wright, over the last 5 years. Is he ready as a true freshman to play? That's a big question going in. I think the secondary is more athletic. Jermon McCoy coming back from an ACL pending there, but Ricky Gibson has been an upgrade from an athleticism standpoint. Linebacker, they're more talented and deeper, again, young. And then the defensive line should be really good again. So raw talent, this group ranks high. But how many preseason All-SEC guys are on this team? When we have that conversation in July, I don't think there's one on offense. And then on defense, you have Jermon McCoy. I think Joshua Josephs deserves attention in that conversation. Arion Carter has a ton of talent, but we're waiting for him to become that player. So that's part of the issue is good talent, speed, athleticism. They've upgraded there, but they need it to develop quickly for Tennessee to hit its goals this fall.
Teams going in one direction, South Carolina, Florida, maybe even Alabama, LSU. Seems like Tennessee, not one of them. Seems like Tennessee going the other direction. Is 8-4. You can break down the quarterback situation if you want to now in terms of handicapping who's going to play, but like, is that what this expectation should now be for this team? Is, hey, good team, solid team, talented team, well coached team, still missing a high end talent as you just alluded to. 8 wins sounds about right.
Right now, if you could tell me, hey, Tennessee's going to go 8-4, I would say, hey, they figured some things out. They at least managed as best they could with this change at quarterback. 10 days ago, if you said 8-4, Tennessee fans would have freaked out, understandably. So what happened? What went wrong? Well, the quarterback leaving is a pretty good answer there. So is it Jake Merklinger? Is it George McIntyre? Is it player to be named in the transfer portal? That's the unknown. Yeah. Tennessee has money to spend. We know that at the quarterback position. But then that person coming in has to learn everything quickly. And that's a big ask with a group that is also still trying to figure things out around that position. But having to play Georgia in September, having to go to Alabama, having to go to Florida, plus other quality opponents that Tennessee will play in the SEC. Syracuse is probably thinking, hey, we're going to go get Tennessee in the opener. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that is a more real game than the odds makers would have said before Nico left. So
Q's losing a lot of big time players off that team. Just for the record, let me calm the nerves for Tennessee fans.
Yeah, with Nico, Tennessee was set as like a 13, 14-point favorite to give you some perspective. So I would think Tennessee's still a favorite, still should win the game. But in college football, you never know. So I would say if Tennessee can go 8-4, that is a solid job having managed out of this situation. And then you try to bounce back in a big way in 2026.
ML Rose, of course, our great and amazing local sponsor here on SEC Football Live. If you are in the Middle Tennessee area and you're visiting or you live there, make sure you check out one of their 6 great locations, great burgers, craft beer, fantastically curated taps at the bars, great pregame location on a Saturday if you want to watch SEC baseball, for example. They got great happy hour, 2-for-1s. They got a little brunch menu there with the SEC appropriately named, the sausage, egg, and cheese biscuit. So make sure you check out ML Rose, 6 great locations, a 7th one coming to my neighborhood, Josh, which is what I care about because my daughters love ML Rose. No better endorsement than from a 7 and 8-year-old girl who love burgers and fries. Let's leave on a high note here. Josh Ward, of course, you can catch him, WNML in Knoxville every single day with Jason Swain. All right, so here's my last question to leave on a high note here for Tennessee fans, and that is a lot of this conversation I enjoy in the spring is sort of I like to sort of like temp check all the athletic departments because NIL is such a big deal, because administrations are such a big deal, because now we have general managers all across the sport. It's such a bigger part of success on the field than ever before. And again, on a positive here, Florida got to ask questions about what's going on. Alabama, you got to ask questions about what's going on. LSU got to ask questions about what's going on. Tennessee might be the one athletic department in the entire conference, maybe Georgia, that you just look at and you go, I think they're in better shape than almost everybody else. And is that a fair way to look at, like, what's the right question to ask about the Tennessee athletic department? It feels like it is in such good shape. Mm-hmm. This is the first sort of like moment in Danny White's tenure where you go, wait a second, what's going on here? But otherwise, they're as healthy as anybody, right?
The story with Nico is the first, wait, what's going on over there? Or what's happened here kind of story that we've had in a while, just besides individual game results. But Tennessee basketball had a tremendous season. Tennessee baseball is the reigning national champ with a chance to win again. Softball's doing well as it has for a couple of decades now. And then across the board, sports that fans aren't keeping up with on a regular basis, a story it seems every other week has to do with championships being won at the SEC and even the national level. Yeah. So across the board, there is just a ton of excitement about what's happening with the leadership, the direction of the university and the athletic department working together. Year one is behind Kim Caldwell. She's created excitement again around Lady Vols basketball. So set the Nico story aside, everything else has been a big positive. The hires made with the Vol Network, so the broadcasting side. Jason Swain, my teammate every day, is a part of that team with Ramon Foster and Mike Keith and Brent Hubbs, and everybody's all fired up about that group that made their debut during the spring game. So
as you should. Mike Keith is a Hall of Famer for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Nico thing, and if they get a quarterback that fans are excited about, they'll even cross that one off the list. So fans are rightfully very happy about what's happening with the University of Tennessee.
Look, players win plays, coaches win games, athletic directors win championships. It sounds weird, but that's you have to set up your programs to go find the success. And very few have done it better than this athletic department, which is a strange thing to say considering we're talking about Tennessee. But that's where we're at. So end on a high note here, Josh. Thank you so much, man. Anything else? Tell everybody where they can find you, self-promote here.
Yeah, you can podcast us. So if you search Josh and Swain wherever you get your podcast, just like finding 440 Sports material, you can find Josh and Swain. We're 11 to 2 Central Time, noon to 3 Eastern Time, every day on the Sports Animal in Knoxville, myself and VFL Jason Swain.
There you go. Josh, thank you so much for joining us, man. We do appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, man.
Braden, thank you.